Hello fellow woodworkers and welcome to this week's edition of the Garage Workshop, and this week we're going to be changing this into this. Roll the intro. So you will have seen in my previous video that I have a new Mitre saw kindly sent to me by the guys at Evolution, which is quite a lot bigger than this. Now they also sent me a Mitre saw stand, and thanks to everyone who put in the comments what they thought about whether I should stick with a station like this or whether I should just use the Mitre saw on the stand. So I have decided to keep the Mitre saw on the stand for now because two key reasons really. Number one, I like the fact that it can then be folded up and put away and takes up a lot less room in the garage workshop. And secondly, if I keep this like this, it's a whole lot of real estate where I'm quite limited on space, and I would like more space in the garage to put things in different places. So for example, I could have my flip top cart here, again link in the description to that, it was a recent video. But this whole unit here was one of the first things I bought, not the Mitre saw, again link in the description, but these two units either side was some of the first things I made in the garage workshop, and to be honest with you, they're not the greatest quality. The drawers are falling apart, they're not really the storage solution that I need, because when I made them I had a lot less tools and a lot less stuff, and I just made them a general size. I didn't really make them the size that would fit the things that I have, the tools I have. So what I'm going to do is go for a massive redevelopment of this whole area. It's probably going to be a couple of videos because, whoops, and there's another reason why. So what I'm going to do is go for a whole redevelopment of this area. It's probably going to be a couple of videos, but one of the things I'm going to do is change all this stacking system for my T-tracks, and I'm going to have a long cupboard sort of shelving unit. I'm going to get rid of the Mitre saw. I'm going to get rid of this desking station, and I'm going to create one whole sort of trolley that is smaller than this and is also mobile. So I'm going to put casters on it and make it mobile so that at any point I can move it around the workshop if I want to do something specific. So the first thing I'm going to do is make the new unit completely, then I'm going to transfer things onto it, then I'll take all this apart and then I'll put it in place, and I'll look at where I am there because I've got a couple of other really interesting thoughts about some other storage solutions. So first thing to do is to start cutting down the plywood. So the first thing to do was to get the wood and do really accurate measurements. I will just say, and I know there are people that watch these videos from all over the world, but you really do now have to factor in the cost of the materials you're using, plywood in particular, before we do any build at all now. I certainly know in the US wood is as expensive as it is here, but you are talking £40 plus for a sheet of plywood now, and I actually use the equivalent of 1 3/4 sheets for this whole build. Now I was very lucky, I managed to raid the offcut bin and got some hardwood plywood, but without that it would have been really significant, the amount of money that I had to spend on it. So this was a full sheet which I got them to cut down in the shop for me to a sort of more manageable level. I then used my Evolution Mitre saw to cut through it, made light work, really good cut, and this is where I've got the two tracks extended and they made a great cut. Next thing of course was the traditional pocket holes. Took quite a long time to do that, and with this next bit I used one of these little portable pocket hole things that I got from Wish. It's got everything you need in it except for the clamp, and I have to say generally it was okay, but as you can see from the dust that's coming out, there was quite a lot of the metal that got cut with this, and I don't understand why, because it's all very angled. I know, you know, people say, well, with cheaper things you sort of get a cheaper performance, but I was surprised actually, and there was a couple of times I could hear sort of metal grinding on. The other thing is it's very difficult to know exactly where to sort of set it. I sort of tried my best, but as you can see the first holes I made sort of on the left there were too close, so I just used smaller screws when I came to do that in the finished product. But I got them done, duplicated it on both sides, and I got the holes made, which is the most important thing. So I've left this whole section in exactly as it is, just to show you that when you get fixed into a project, or if you are me, you do tend to make mistakes where you're sort of so far thinking ahead that you're not thinking about what you're doing now. As you can see, my Parkside plunge saw is really struggling to get through this piece of wood, and I have no idea why. It did eventually get there, but there's a lot of burnout you can see, and it was a really uneven cut. I had to go back over it a few times. Of course, it wasn't until after I'd cut this piece of wood that I realised I'd adjusted my blade on the Parkside saw down, and it wasn't quite big enough to get through the wood. So I just readjusted it, and I got a much better cut. So I've left this next bit in because had it worked, it would have been epic, I think. I tried to cut this whole sheet one at a time and it just wouldn't work, so I then I had to resort to sort of cutting it in smaller pieces. I think that would have worked if I had something that sort of rolled on the desk, but it has given me the idea that perhaps somewhere I need an outfield table for my saw, but that's going to be another video in the future. I then just cut down this piece of, this is a 12mm piece of plywood, and this is going to be the sort of slats instead of having to use roller slides. So here I'm just putting the pocket holes on one of the internal sort of uprights or supports, because this is going to have those wooden slats on it that you can see, rather than having to use drawer runners. But I'm not going to be able to obviously put the pocket holes in this later on, because it's going to have those slats across it. So I thought I'll put the pocket holes in now just on this one piece, and then I can start putting the slats on. You might have noticed in this video as well, I just want to point this out, that my little pocket hole jig there on the side of my bench is very loose and hanging off, because my new Evolution Mitre saw that was on the stand actually slipped over and caught the pocket hole jig and nearly ripped it off. So I did reinforce it, but just in case you're wondering, that's why it's almost hanging off. Okay, so these are the sides of the internal sides of the Mitre saw stand, and I've just knocked together this this little template sort of jig thing. I saw it in a video which I'll put a link in the description to. I can't remember the person who it was, but essentially it's got two pieces of wood, one that sits on the side to make sure that the bottom rail is in the right place, and then one that's inset so that it gives me the right positioning for the effectively wooden drawer runner. So if I just pop a couple of brad nails in there, I'm going to have exactly the right distance up from the bottom, and I'm also going to have the right inset on the left hand side. Now I could just do this very, very gently and take my time, but to be honest with you, as long as I do the same on both sides, if it's not 100% level, it doesn't matter a huge amount, because the most important thing is that they are level with each other. So put it down, I'm going to shoot that one in, then I just move it up to the top, lay it against, and I'm going to do that all the way up. Now, I have deliberately cut 10 pieces, 5 on each side. Obviously this is going to take more than 5, which I totally get, but what I want to do is keep them at this level, see how I get to the top before I commit to cutting the rest of the wood, because to me I want to make sure I've got these in the right place. So I'm just going to get out the brad nailer and just start putting them in now. So I put the first couple in. Apologies, the camera had failed to start or shut itself off. There's something really important happens here, and I'm leaving this footage in on purpose. As I was using my gun, using the compressor, which by the way is a brilliant setup, I'm really happy with it, I noticed that as it was firing, some of the nails almost seemed like there were two of them coming out at once. Now I have this problem a lot with my Ryobi Airstrike gun, and I just could not work out what it was that was causing it. And actually on one, when I fired it and lifted the gun up, the entire nail was protruding, and for the life of me I couldn't work out what it was that was causing it. So at this point I just resorted to a sort of old-fashioned approach of whacking with pin nails, whacking the nails in with a pin hammer. But it wasn't until I did the second section of these later in the video that I worked out what the problem was, and I'll explain that when we get there. But this is a really good setup. The little high-end compressor and the little brad nail gun, just with, I think they're 25 mil brad nails in there. It just worked really well. The only other thing I did, I just gave the whole thing a rub over with a sanding block. Even though I'd sort of sanded them a bit beforehand, I just wanted to make sure it was as smooth as it could be. So I just knocked it back a little bit with my sanding block. It's got 80 grit paper in it. So with that done, I just duplicated the exact same process on the other side. But this is at the stage where I started to get a couple of little misfires. I'm not sure if you can see that, if it's clear enough, but there were a couple of little ones at first, and I just thought, I'm not going to worry about that. And I started getting a few sparks out of the end of the gun as well. And I think that's where the brad nails were sort of clashing either in or on the way down. But you can see there, I can see what's wrong. And at this point, I couldn't work out what it was that was causing it. If you're watching this video, just put in the comments whether you've worked out what's wrong. I was absolutely gobsmacked when I eventually worked out what the problem was. And as I said, it wasn't until later on when I came to do the other set of draw runners in the other internal compartment that I actually realised. To me, I just thought this was either me not using the tool properly or some issue. And the other thing here, major health and safety issue, I completely forgot. Obviously I should have pulled the gun out. I didn't fiddle with anything, and there weren't any nails in it at this point, but shouldn't have done that. So the next stage was to cut down the sort of other internal sides or side braces, and you can probably tell I've only speeded this up a bit, but the Parkside saw really struggled with this, and I was really surprised. It's two pieces of 18mm hard plywood, but it's cut that well easy before. You know, I've never had this much issue, so I think it might be time for a new blade. I'm also wondering whether it's worth trying to sharpen the blade. If you've ever done that, please let me know in the comments, because the price of blades like wood is really increasing. And as you can see, that is a bit of a rough and nasty cut there. So the next thing to do was to break out the table saw. This is a strip and offcut of wood that I've got, the wood that's going to make the slats, which is 12mm. So I just took that off, to get a straight edge and to get it the right length, which is the bit you can see there. And then I just started running the strips through. Now at that point I suddenly realized I was using my finger as a push stick, a push stick, which you shouldn't do. So I was reunited with my push stick, and then it was just a case of trimming them down. And as I've said in previous videos, this has still got the original Evolution cuts everything blade in it, so I was getting okay cuts, but not as smoother cuts as when I use my dedicated blade. But for cutting down bigger pieces like this, it does the job fine. It gives a good enough quality cut. So with those cut, it was time to do the other piece. As you can see, these are shorter because this panel doesn't go all the way to the back, and it was at this point I realised what the problem was. The piece of metal on the top, which holds the sort of metal plate down where the staples come out, had come loose. And that meant it was firing multiple brad nails out. So I tightened it down and it worked okay. But by the end of using it, it had come loose again. So I don't know if there's something I need to do, whether I need to put some thread spray or something on it. But anyway, the next thing to do was to pocket hole all of the doors, the internal sort of supports really, top and bottom. So with all of those pocket holes done, it was time to start actually putting it together. And interestingly, that piece of wood, which is sort of the base, had bowed a bit from just being stood up. So I've sort of turned it over, so this is going against the bow, so hopefully it will straighten it out a little bit. I really took my time, and this piece of video you're watching now is speeded up 4 times, so it just shows you how much I took my time, because I wanted to get every single one of these absolutely perfect. And that's why I'm using that little set of metal squares that you can, metal sort of set squares that you can see there. They're really good actually. I've got them from Temu, and they're basically a rip-off of the Rockler ones, but they're really, really nice. So I just began the process of putting pocket hole screws in. I specifically use 32mm pocket hole screws for this, and the reason is they just stopped under the surface. It didn't break through the surface of the wood, but I wanted enough that it was going to give me good grip on pieces of wood, even though the forces on this are going to be working well. So I just chucked in a load of pocket holes on the end and made sure it was 100% correct. The measuring and laying out and fixing things on this build is on a different level to anything I've done before. This is actually hard to see, but this is the other side to the side you just saw me putting on. The side you saw me putting on, if you remember, the pocket hole screws are on the outside. That's just the way it worked out. To be honest, I'm not that worried about them being on the outside, because I think it's going to have, the outside is going to have the storage that's on my current workbench on it anyway, so I'm not too worried about that. The next thing to do was some really hyper accurate marking, and actually this shows you sometimes with a build like this that you want to get everything precise, that you have to adapt and sort of change what you're doing. I offered up the internal sort of internal support, I suppose you could say, and I could just tell by eye, well, it looked like it wasn't straight to me. So I thought, well, I don't want to start off on the wrong foot and have it not right, because obviously this has got to be incredibly straight and level everywhere. So I just popped in a couple of pocket hole screws, but then I went away and on my mitre saw, I just cut a couple of spacer strips that are the correct size, just out some MDF. So I just continued the process. There you can see my little spacer, which I am so glad I did that, because when I came to fixing these to the top of the cabinet, as you'll see in a minute, they were way out, and if I had not had those spacers and just done it by eye, it would have been out quite a long way. So just hooked a spacer in either side, and as you can see now, I've got the majority of the struts in, and those two struts are smaller in the middle. Now I've left this piece of footage in because I think it's really, really important. This is yet again another mistake, but the reason why I think this is important to keep in is for two reasons. Number one, as you can see, hopefully, the entire thing is bowed across the workbench. You can see it's raised up just by where the drill is there, the screwdriver is there. Now that is going to impact on the next thing, because with that like not leveling flat, it's going to sort of almost bend like a banana. So when I went to offer up these two major supports, they didn't fit. I mean, there you can see how much it's sticking out by, but they didn't fit. Now the gap, the amount that they were out, it's a bit hard to see. It looks more that side on the right hand side than it actually is. And of course these supports were out by 3.6 centimeters. Why is 3.6 centimeters relevant? Because it is of course two pieces of 18mm plywood. So what I had done is built the entire thing, because that stretcher that you can see that I'm on now is exactly the same length as the base part and the top of my unit, but that doesn't account for the fact that I've got two sides. So it gave me the sort of quandary of what to do, because there was no way it was ever going in there. So I had to take these, run them through the table saw and just shave off 36mm so that it matched exactly the width. And when I'd cut the ends off, it fitted a treat. You can still see a gap. That's obviously where it's still sort of leaning, but I did close that up as I did it up, as you can see, and then I just secured it with some pocket holes. I'm not going to lie, I was very, very apprehensive doing this, because just me carrying it, the weight of this plywood is significant. So what I was trying to do here was actually just stand the unit up so I can maneuver it. Now, you might see, you might not see, some of those internal dividers, although they're fixed, did flop about a bit. I didn't lose any of them, and none of them broke out or even came loose, but it was a little bit tricky. They moved a little bit more than I wanted. So when I managed to get it sort of down, it's not so much that it was heavy. It was more the awkwardness of it than anything else. So when I managed to get it down, it's just resting on one of the sort of dumbbell things I've got on the floor. You can see it there. When I got it to this point, it was actually quite easy to wrestle. It was more the fact that it was cumbersome and awkward than the fact that it was heavy. But you can see that sort of second one up is leaning down quite a lot, because obviously that's got a double set of like drawer runners on it, and then I just was able to hook in the other stretcher, and that gave the whole shape rigidity. It didn't help that one, and you can see it's really leaning down now, but I sorted it out pretty quick, but it did help me just to do what I needed to do. So the next thing I did after I'd fixed it together was just screw it in again, same size pocket holes, top and bottom, really easy. But I did actually put a couple of screws in from the other side, which you'll see later. I then put an outline on all four corners, and this was to fit the casters. I just used like heavy duty casters from Screwfix. I'll put a link in the description to them. They're pretty good casters, I have to be honest, and they're relatively inexpensive. So I just pre-drilled all of the holes, top and bottom, and then I screwed them in. I didn't go for mega long screws on this because I didn't want to pierce it, but I went for these small sort of self-tapping screws, which I know are really good at fixing these. I had them on a lot of my casters. So I just attached all four of the wheels onto the bottom. I'd measured them out, so 2 at the top, 2 at the bottom, and 2 exactly in the middle. And actually it was interesting because when I've done that and I rolled it around the floor, I realised how uneven my floor is in the garage, but you live and learn. So I was very concerned here whether this would just take all the casters off the bottom, but I went for standing it up. It was a little bit wibbly wobbly, as it would be, because obviously it hasn't got the top. So I'm just checking very carefully that I've got enough room to do it, which I have. And you can tell by the look on my face that I was very worried, but no need to be at all. It went over a treat. It moves really freely. You can see there the gap on the back of those two inset, but I'm not worried about that. I mean, if I was worried, I could always put a piece of wood in there at the back, but really nice. It is a little bit sort of hasn't got the structural integrity it should have, because obviously the top's not on, but I was really happy. All the casters worked and it went exactly as I hoped it would. The next thing that I did was offered up the top. This was actually really tricky, not as easy as it looks, because it's really heavy, that piece of plywood. You can see me sort of struggling with it a bit. It's quite an awkward size, but when I laid it on, making the miniature little adjustments that I had to make to get it exactly where I wanted it to be was actually really difficult. In the end, I had to resort to using my wooden mallet just to sort of knock it into shape. But now you can sort of see how the finished trolley is going to look. But again, I really wanted to take my time here to make sure it was exactly as it should be. The other thing I should have mentioned it earlier is the top is bigger than the bottom. There is a deliberate overhang. The overhang is 8 centimeters, and that is because 8 centimeters will allow me to use up to my mid-range set of clamps. Because one of the problems with the other benches, there's no way to put clamps on. So if I want to put a stop block or anything like that, I just can't. I can't do it. But with this, I can, because I've left enough space that I can use clamps if I want to. The only other thing was I got my set square, set it to 8 and just checked. And now you can see me just tapping it up with the mallet. But I got it set to make sure it's the same both sides. This bit was ridiculously difficult. It was so tight in there for space, but I managed to get it fixed in. So I did drill a hole and hook in just on the end there, because again, you won't see this. As you can see, this is the section with the pocket holes on the outside, because something's going to go and cover that. The next thing to do was to check all the levels, and to my absolute utter surprise, the whole thing is 100% level in every single direction. Even when I put the slats in for the drawers, just perfect. So this was where the spacer came into its own, really. So I'd cut the spacer the same width as the drawers, which I think off the top of my mind was 35 centimeters. And when I went to fix the pocket holes in, obviously I could push the right hand side in to make sure that the spacer is exactly the right space, front and back. So it allowed me to get really super accurate placement of those internal structures, and I checked them off camera with a spirit level, and they were absolutely perfect. So I did that for these two sections, and then obviously for the other two without those, I just used another space that was the right size. And that's what you can see me doing here. I've already done the one next to it, the one on the left. And this one again is the same. This was actually really quite difficult, this. And I think sometimes when you're working on your own, I mean, I could have got a clamp out and done it, to be fair. But sometimes when you're working on a project like this and you're on your own, you've got to overcome and sort of improvise and find a way to do it. So all I did was, to be honest, I just used my body weight to get it all nice and pushed in. So as I'm pushing it up, I'm pushing it across, and that helped me fix them front and back. But I'm going to say it really wasn't easy. So this bit just shows you, there's not a lot of room. I mean, I'm a big bloke, I know, but there wasn't a huge amount of room in there, and I probably could have found another way of doing this, but to be honest with you, this worked. So although it was a bit awkward, yes, although it was a bit fiddly, yes, it wasn't that much of a big issue. It just took time to get everything fixed in and screwed in, and the most important thing for doing this is just making sure that none of these pocket holes split the top surface, which none of them did, thankfully. So, fellow woodworkers, as you can see, the build is finished in its first stage, and that's one of the reasons why I've split this build into two videos. And as you can tell, a lot has gone in to getting it to this stage, but there are a few really important things that I've done on this build that I've never done before. Building in these internal slats to give the shelves, make the internal shelves rather than using drawer slides, was absolutely key, and I'm really pleased to say, and hopefully you can see on the video, they are 100% level. When if you think back on how I did it, I mean, I'm absolutely surprised, but they are 100% level. So I've got lots and lots of storage space in these two bays now. The third bay, my shop vac is going to go there, which is going to feed the Mitre saw that's on the top, and I'll talk a little bit about the Mitre saw in a minute. And then the end bay is for me to put all of my parkside tools in that are in the black plastic cases. So I've designed that so it's wide enough to take the biggest tool and tall enough to take all of the tools that I want to put in it. So every aspect of this design has been 100% laid out, and I can also fit one of the DeWalt T-Track boxes in that gap because it's about roughly the same width as the Evolution shop vac that I've got. So every single part of this is level. I am going to say right now, and hopefully if you've been watching for a while and you've seen my builds, I think this is the best thing that I've ever built. It's certainly the best cabinet that I've ever built, and I'm really pleased with how it's turned out. Although it's only the first stage, and I've got to go around and put on the rest of it, make all the drawers, put the Mitre saw on the top, and then do a fence, which is going to be part 2. I'm so happy with how this has turned out. I think it's absolutely fantastic. Really pleased. In terms of the Mitre saw, I've thought long and hard about the Mitre saw and about different levels, but I'm just not going to do that. I'm just going to put the Mitre saw on the top. And if I want to have a system where I put a rail in or a guide in, then I'm going to look at something which I've seen a few YouTubers do, where I have something either that folds up, or I'm going to use the bottom of this unit, or create some sort of plinth for that unit, and that is going to act as the cutting rail. But to be honest with you, 9 times out of 10, when I use my old Mitre saw in my old Mitre saw station, I didn't have a stop block anyway. I just used something sort of more manual. It could be that I put a T-track in and use just like a sliding up and down block. I haven't decided yet. I will decide that before the next video. My only concern there is just a little bit about whether this plywood will actually take it. I think it will, but again, that's for video number 2. So overall, really pleased. Now, fellow woodworkers, this is your opportunity to get involved in this build via the comments. I haven't decided what finish to put on this yet, whether I'm going to even put a finish on it. So please let me know in the comments, if this was your unit, what would you put on this plywood to seal it? So just mention it in the comments and I'll see what we've got. If this is your first time at the Garage Workshop, thank you so much for watching this video. Please can I ask you to subscribe, like and comment. If you're a regular viewer, again, like and comment. I really enjoyed the feedback I got on my 3-in-1 tool review last week, and I think interacting with you makes this worthwhile. So please don't forget to like and comment, and I will catch you on next week's edition of the Garage Workshop. Take care, fellow woodworkers.